And I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I congratulate you and the Danish delegation on your skillful guidance of the Council this month. We take note of the Secretary General's report on the situation in Afghanistan. We welcome the briefing provided by Special Representative of the Secretary General and Head of UNAMA, Ms. Rosa Otunbayeva. We commend her wise leadership of UNAMA and her efforts to promote normalization in Afghanistan in extremely difficult circumstances. Pakistan will support the renewal of UNAMA's mandate. We also thank Ms. Azada Raz Mohammed for her important contribution. Madam President, there is universal and justifiable concern at the dire situation in Afghanistan. It is afflicted by multiple challenges, some inherited from history and others self-inflicted by ideological and political inflexibility. Pakistan has faced the adverse impacts of the series of crises Afghanistan has lived through during the past 40 years, hosting millions of Afghan refugees infected by its extremist groups and the inflow of arms and drugs. In the 20-year conflict, which ended in 2021, Pakistan consistently advocated engagement and sought to broker an inclusive peace. After the precipitate withdrawal of foreign forces in August 2021, Pakistan facilitated the exit of NATO's troops and Western civilians, accepted the temporary location of Afghans affiliated with the previous regime, and accepted 700,000 Afghans fearing persecution by the Taliban. History will attest to Pakistan's positive role. Madam President, it is not surprising that Afghanistan, which was so heavily dependent on foreign assistance for over 20 years, faces a humanitarian crisis and economic stagnation following the Western withdrawal. We believe that humanitarian assistance to the over 20 million destitute Afghans must be unconditional and generous. The response plan has received only 3.5% of the required 2.42 billion. The UN Strategic Framework for Afghanistan has received less than 11% of the 2.53 billion required for 2025. Allowing Afghan suffering is inconsistent with the call for upholding human rights in Afghanistan. The Afghan economy grew last year by 2.7%. It will continue to struggle without foreign cooperation and investment. Pakistan supports the call to unfreeze the assets of Afghanistan's central bank. This will revive the banking sector and end the cash transfers which are partially responsible for money flowing into the hands of terrorists. Afghanistan's trade could grow significantly if it resolved its problems with Pakistan, its natural transit and trade route, by ending cross-border terrorism, arbitrary construction of border posts on Pakistan's territory, and the smuggling of goods into Pakistan. The implementation of the shovel-ready connectivity projects, such as TAPI, the gas pipeline, CASA 1000, the electricity pipeline, and the Uzbekistan-Afghanistan-Pakistan railway, could expand trade relations and commercial linkages and contribute significantly to economic growth and job creation within Afghanistan and the region. Madam President, the human rights situation in Afghanistan is another self-inflicted injury. Far from fulfilling its earlier commitments, the Kabul government has doubled down on its restrictions against women and girls. These are inconsistent with international norms and obligations and contrary to the laws and teachings of Islam. This was made clear by the Muslim world in the Islamabad Declaration on Girls' Education in Muslim Communities hosted by Pakistan on 11 and 12 January 2025. Madam President, the greatest threat to security and stability in Afghanistan and the entire region, and indeed the world, arises from the over 20 terrorist organizations present in Afghanistan. The Taliban government faces a challenge to its power and ideology from Daesh, ISIL-K. They are fighting Daesh, but obviously not very effectively, as evident from the numerous attacks claimed by Daesh in Afghanistan, as well as its attacks in Kirman, Iran, Moscow, Russia, and more recently in Peshawar, Pakistan. As noted in the 35th report of the monitoring team of the Al-Qaeda and Daesh Committee, Pakistani authorities successfully foiled attempts by ISIL-K terrorists to cross over from Afghanistan into Pakistan and prevented its external operations branch from establishing itself in Pakistan, detaining several high-profile operatives involved in the Kerman and Crocus attacks. Amongst those detained was an individual named Muhammad Sharifullah, an Afghan who plotted the Abbey Gate bombing during the U.S. evacuation from Afghanistan in 2021. Unfortunately, while fighting Daesh, the Kabul authorities have failed to address the threat posed to the region and beyond by other terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda, the TTP, and Baluch terrorists, including the Baluch Liberation Army and the Majid Brigade, which are present in Afghanistan. The TTP, the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, with 6,000 fighters, is the largest designated terrorist organization operating from Afghanistan. With safe havens close to our border, the TTP has conducted numerous attacks against Pakistan's soldiers, civilians, and institutions, resulting in hundreds of casualties. I am grateful to the SRSG for mentioning these attacks against Pakistan. We have evidence that the Kabul authorities have not only tolerated but are complicit in the conduct of the TTP's terrorist cross-border attacks. Further, the TTP is collaborating with other terrorist groups present in Afghanistan, like the BLA and the Majid Brigade, which seek to destabilize Pakistan and disrupt our economic cooperation with China, especially the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, through a terrorist campaign. The TTP also receives external support and financing from our principal adversary. The TTP, perceived as enjoying Kabul's patronage, is fast emerging as an umbrella organization for regional terrorist groups whose objectives are to undermine the security and stability of all of Afghanistan's neighbors. Given its long association with Al-Qaeda, the TTP could pose not only a regional but a global terrorist threat. In countering the TTP's cross-border operations, our security and border forces have confiscated some of the modern arms acquired by the Afghan authorities from stocks left behind by foreign forces. The Kabul authorities have the responsibility to retrieve these weapons from the terrorist groups. Madam President, Pakistan will continue to take all necessary measures to eliminate the terrorist threats to our national security in accordance with our right to self-defense under international law and in accordance with the relevant resolutions of the Security Council. The declaration of the ministerial meeting of the foreign ministers of China, Iran, Pakistan, and the Russian Federation on 27 September 2024 was a welcome affirmation of the regional consensus to eliminate the terrorist threat from Afghanistan. We remain committed to cooperating with our regional and international partners to effectively combat the menace of terrorism which threatens so many countries in Asia, Africa, and elsewhere today. Madam President, given the centrality of the terrorist threat to Afghanistan's future, it is strange that the Secretary General's report, which is entitled, and I quote, "The Situation in Afghanistan and Its Implications for International Peace and Security," unquote, while it covers the humanitarian, economic, and human rights issues, it does not cover the issue of terrorism. We are offered the bureaucratic explanation that UNAMA's mandate does not cover counterterrorism, which we are told is the mandate of the Office of Counterterrorism. The Office of Counterterrorism's work program includes counterterrorism efforts relating to Central Asia and Afghanistan, but so far, not Pakistan, which is facing daily terrorist attacks, or Iran, China, or Russia. Nor has the 1988 Taliban Committee or the 1373 Counterterrorism Committee been activated so far to address the terrorist threat in and from Afghanistan. Pakistan will initiate consultations on the creation or activation of an appropriate mechanism to address this issue, including a working group on counterterrorism within the Doha process. International consideration, Madam President, is also essential to ensure the earliest possible repatriation of Afghan refugees, especially from Pakistan and Iran. Pakistan cannot be expected to host the refugees indefinitely or to hold back from expelling undocumented Afghans, some of whom have been involved in unlawful activities, including terrorism, within Pakistan. Madam President, we need to intensify our efforts to promote early normalization in Afghanistan. Pakistan was the first to advocate sustained engagement with the Afghan interim government. Pakistan has welcomed the Doha process. However, the steps undertaken under its framework must go beyond counter narcotics and the private sector. All the fundamental issues identified in the independent assessment report by the Special Coordinator, Ambassador Feridun Siniroglu, in 2023, including counterterrorism, human rights, and inclusive governance, must be addressed in the Doha process. To this end, we endorse the Special Coordinator's proposal to adopt a roadmap of reciprocal actions by the Afghan interim government on human rights, political inclusion, and counterterrorism, and by the international community on economic revival, connectivity projects, the travel ban exemptions, sanctions relief, and eventual recognition of the UN representation for the interim authorities. This could be elaborated into a time-indicative program of action under the mosaic approach proposed by UNAMA and provide a clear pathway towards normalization in Afghanistan. Madam President, in conclusion, as close and contiguous neighbors with shared bonds of history, geography, ethnicity, language, faith, and culture, the destinies of Afghanistan and Pakistan are intertwined. The people of Pakistan are deeply sensitive to the suffering of their Afghan brothers and sisters. We are steadfast in our commitment to support all possible efforts at the bilateral, regional, and global level to achieve peace, stability, and development in Afghanistan. After 40 years of conflict, the people of Afghanistan deserve no less. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank